would open up in your Bibles and turn to the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Revelation, chapter 13. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10. And it reads, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints." Amen. You may be seated. I want to talk to you from the title, The Coming World Ruler, Part 2. We started on this last week in dealing with, I shared with you and introduced to you the upcoming world ruler that's going to come upon the earth after the church is taken out. One of the things that we're looking at in chapters 12 through 14, we see in these chapters the introduction of 12 person or characters that are during the tribulation period that will come into existence, into being. The first that has already come into being, but they're prominent in here, looking at this from Satan's perspective, we saw the woman, which represents Israel. But we also saw the child, the male child, which represents Christ. And we also saw the red dragon, the character who is Satan. We saw in there also, we see that God shows us that there is a remnant that's coming out also during that time, Israel's remnant. And then we see one also who we saw last week coming out, that's coming, I mentioned to you, known as the Antichrist. And in chapter 6 of Revelation, verse 2, we saw when the seals began to be opened that there was one where John said he saw riding on a white horse, one who had a bow, but it had no arrows. And in that, he took over the world in terms of he's going to win the acclaim of mankind during that time, because at that time, it's going to be a chaotic time on the earth. And the Lord is going to allow him to come and take over and be the world ruler. But he's only going to be able to do it with limitations, because God is in control of things. I shared with you last week also that in chapter 13, where we saw the Antichrist has been introduced, we see another individual that's going to be introduced later on, starting in verses 11 through the end of the chapter, and that's known as the false prophet. And so between the red dragon Satan, between the Antichrist, and between the false prophet, we have what's called an unholy trinity. This is an alliance. These two individuals, the Antichrist and the false prophet, they are empowered by Satan himself. And in the process, there's Satan's imps that he's going to use. Satan has always wanted to be glorified. He's always wanted to be worshipped. And God is going to allow Satan during that time at the midway point, during the 7-year tribulation period, he's going to allow Satan to have a lot of reign, but not full reign. Because God has restrictions that he's not going to let Satan destroy everybody. Amen. God is going to cause things. It says in Matthew chapter 24 that during that time, except those days be shortened, that no flesh shall be saved. And so what we see here is a situation where during the introduction of the Antichrist, we see in chapter 13, we see he's introduced that John saw as he stood on the sand of the sea, a beast rise up out of the sea. And if you notice, it's an interesting character because what John saw, this beast, and it's symbolic, he had 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns, 10 crowns. And what I shared with you last week, that the 7 heads and the 10 horns, 7 heads represent 7 successive world empires. If you go back and recall in the Old Testament times, there was the first world empire known as Egypt. And we remember about Egypt. Then the next world empire was Assyria. After Assyria came Babylon. And after Babylon came Medo-Persia. And after Medo-Persia came the Grecian Empire. And then after the Grecian Empire, we see Rome that took over during the New Testament time, right? And then there's going to come a time, the next on the scene is the revived empire, which is the Roman Empire again. And we see that on this beast, it has 10 horns. And the 10 horns, in this case, horns always represent strength and power. And the 10 horns, in this case, represent the revived Roman Empire, which is in Europe right now, and you know what's called the European Union that's already out there. Yeah. I warned you last week and let you know that when you see these things happening, it should change our mindset to the way we look at things, because right now, times are moving even more rapid than what they were moving. If you look back, most of us, I was blessed to be born in the middle of the 20th century. Well, not so much the middle, but towards 1962. Okay? I was blessed to see a time when technology was there, but it wasn't like it is now. When I talk about it, the young people look at me like, oh, you ancient. Well, we had TV when I was born. There's some in here that can tell you what it was like to not have TV or things. But we only had 3 channels. Look at what you can do right now. Look at what I told you last week. There were 3 waves that we're in the 3rd wave right now. If you think about it, the first wave from the time that God created the heavens and the earth up until the time in the late 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, that time was known as the agricultural wave. The agricultural wave, where the economy was governed by farm life and agriculture, and that was the main industry. From that time, from the industrial age, from the agricultural age, we started in the industrial age. That's when you had the big businesses, the factories, and all that. Technology started to take a step up. And then now, if you notice that economically we are now in the information wave. We're in the technological wave where you're sitting in worship right now. And Brother Aaron shared with me last week when we were Facebook Live, he said that the megabytes per second were slow because he said it appears that a lot of people in the sanctuary were hooked up to the Wi-Fi. It has slowed things down. People used to come to church and look at the preacher. Now they come to the church and look at their phones. That's the information wave. Alright? I know they're not all looking at the sermon on Facebook Live. They texting, Facebooking, Snapchatting, tweeting, and doing all that stuff. And some of them are looking at their Bibles, but the rest are talking to where you want to eat after church and all that stuff. I'll hook up with you later and all that madness and stuff like that can wait. But anyway, Anyway, we are now moving at warp speed towards the end of the age. Let me tell you why I say that. Number one, why things are ripe for a coming world ruler. When you look at we're quickly moving into, there used to be a thing where you could you had to wait. Remember, you guys remember when you had to go into the bank to get your money? I remember as a kid, my father would go to the bank on a Friday, and he would get out, say for the weekend, he would get out like $50. And you could get $50 out back then, and it last you all the weekend, well into the next week. I remember going with my mother and father to the grocery store. My mother would take $20 and come back with bags and bags and bags of groceries. You take $20 now, you come back with one item. And then you have to pay 10 cents for a bag. I told you last time, I was talking about that. My wife gets mad at me because she got all these bags. You know, the ones with all the names and all the flowers and all that stuff. And I'm walking out the house, I'm going to the store. I don't want to carry them bags. I definitely don't want to carry them bags. They say, how many bags do you need? I need 5. 50 cents, okay. And then she said, you forgot to take the bag. Sure didn't. But my point is that we are moving now at warp speed. People always tell me, they say, Pastor, time just seems to be moving faster. Yeah. I said, there's still 60 minutes an hour. There's still 60 seconds in a minute. There's still 24 hours in a day. There's still 365 days a year. And 366 in a leap year. Time is still, but we have more activity now. You do the math. You think about it, right? I want you, all of us, those are 20 and above. Well, 20 don't count because you're still kind of young. 30 and above. I want you to ask yourself a question. When you were in your adolescent stage, didn't it seem like time moved slow? And you judged it by your birthday. Couldn't wait to have your birthday, could you? Because you know it was going to be, you're going to get some good things, right? But it's not like with my parents, because they didn't have good things back when they were coming up. Because I used to ask my father, what was it like for Christmas? He said, oh man, we got stuff like oranges, apples, and all that stuff. I said, oh man, what a horrible Christmas. That must have been here. But I didn't know no better. I came along when you would get gifts and things. And you remember it take like a whole year, 2 years to have a birthday. Don't you? You couldn't wait to get older. Then you became a teenager. Then you were like, yeah. And you couldn't wait to get older. You guys remember that, don't you? All right. Don't sit there and look like you don't know what I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden, during that time, you started having a birthday a year. Right? And my father used to tell me, son, when you don't rush things, because when you turn into your 20s, the years will go fly by. I used to think, I didn't say it out loud, but I said, he's old. He don't really know what he's talking about. And when you're a teenager, you think you know everything anyway, don't you? You hold the key to life. Your parents, even though they've been around, they know absolutely nothing. You need to school them on what's right and what's wrong. And so, when you hit your 20s, and you finally get to 30 next year, after you have when you hit 21, you're 30 the next year. So you went from having a birthday every 2 years to a birthday every year to having 2 birthdays in a year. That's what it seems like, don't it? Time is because of all the activity. But when you look at all that and you see what's happening in the world today, and I know I'm taking my time, but I'm not going to even be long today either. I know that when we look at things, we never saw all of the stuff that's happening so compacted together. Just this morning in Tennessee, someone went into the Waffle House and opened fire in the Waffle House. Everywhere you turn, I was looking briefly at the news, they're gassing people in Syria. Everywhere you turn, there's something startling happening all over the world. It used to be you waited for things to happen, but now God is saying, I'm removing my restraint. And in the process of that, God is telling us, He's saying, you make sure you know who I am wherever you are. Because I can let you be in IHOP. I can let you be in Denny's. I can let you be in the restaurant. And I can let someone open fire on you in there. So you need to be ready no matter what. Think about the lady on the Southwest Airlines jet. Same day Reverend Davidson flew out. And all of a sudden, things can happen anywhere, right? But look at all that's lining up with nations all over the world. I thank God for our military men that are here today. Our military personnel. And this all is happening, and God is showing us this stuff is coming more rapidly in our lifetime. Business as usual, not anymore. And so what we have what's right for the oncoming of the Antichrist that may come soon, we never know. There is an English historian, Arnold J. Toynbee, who made this statement in 1953. He said, when you look at the world's climate of that day, he says, by forcing on mankind more and more lethal weapons, and at the same time making the world more and more interdependent economically, technology has brought mankind to such a degree of distress that we are ripe for deifying any new Caesar who might succeed in bringing the world unity and peace. That's what's going to be the selling point for the upcoming Antichrist. Because chaos is coming in. If you would take a step down memory lane with me, in almost every president or person running for president that we've had, and when there was a war going on, they promised, I'm going to stop the war. Right? In 1,500 years, there has been war after war after war. And there has not been one who can stop it. When God lets a war happen, I said He lets a war happen, only God can stop the war. I believe the songwriter said this, right? He makes wars to cease unto the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in sunder. He burns the chariot in the fire. And then He tells us, when there is war, He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted above the earth. Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. So when you look at that and you see this coming on, you just need to understand that the Lord is in control. I want you to read here a quote from G.K. Chesterton, who was a writer, a poet, and a lay theologian. And he lived between 1874 and 1936. G.K. Chesterton said this: one of the paradoxes of this age is that this is the age of pacifism, but not the age of peace. At the time he wrote that, he said this is the age of pacifism, where we want to, it's a belief that any violence or anything, we want to settle that without becoming violent. Okay, we want to have peaceful measures, we want to talk it out. But how's that, guys? How many peace treaties have we had throughout the history of the world? Peace treaty after peace treaty is signed, only to see something crop up. And what I'm telling you is that the world is ripe for the oncoming of Antichrist. Let me tell you what Catholic Bishop Fulton J. Sheen has said. He lived from 1895. He died in 1979. And what I'm telling you is 1979, that was 39 years ago, right? All right, that was my heyday. I was a teenager then, right? Bill, we were all teenagers, right, Bill? You were a little older than teenager back then, but we were all teenagers. All right, and the bottom line is that Fulton J. Sheen said this. He said the Antichrist will come disguised as a great humanitarian. He will talk peace, prosperity, and plenty, not as a means to lead us to God, but as a means in themselves. He will explain guilt away psychologically. He will make men shrink in shame if their fellow men say they are not broad-minded and liberal enough. He will spread the lie that men will never be better until they make society better. How long have we been trying to make society better? Remember the 70s? I like to teach the word to sing harmony. It's a Coca-Cola commercial, but they took a song about the hippie movement. And remember John Lennon and Yoko Ono? All they're asking is give peace a chance. People have been trying to bring peace for the longest. But let me tell you when Jesus came. Jesus made a statement, right? Not Jesus, the angelic beings that came down on the night in which Jesus was born. They said, for unto us a child was born. Unto us a son was given. All right? Now that was Isaiah. But look what Isaiah said. I'm sorry, I got my mixed up. All right? For unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. And the government shall be upon his shoulders. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, right? That's what I said, now, right? Now, when the angels came down in Luke chapter 2, and then he said something like this. He said in Luke chapter 2 that there will be goodwill toward man, and the peace on earth and goodwill toward men. And we think that the peace on earth, he was talking about the cessation of war. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what Jesus was talking about. That's not what the angels were proclaiming. He was talking about peace between God and man. Because, see, outside of Christ, men and women are hostile enemies to God the Father. God says, you are my enemy, but yet when you come to know Christ, that brings peace between God and man. Let me tell you something, everybody. War is going to happen, regardless of who's in office. I don't care who's in office. But there's coming a time when the world ruler of that day is going to come and mesmerize the world. And he's going to come and people are going to flock to him. Right now, we are all independent nations, but we are becoming more interdependent with one another. And so the time is right for that to be. And so, like I shared with you last week in verses 1 and 2, that 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns, which represent diadems in verse 1, and those represent their ruling power, and those confederate nations that come together. And upon his heads, that's the beast's heads, is the name of blasphemy. And that term blasphemy means that everyone who has been a world leader has come with this pride and arrogance, puffed up because of where they get when they get in office. And they think more highly of themselves than they ought to. And yet they don't realize that it's by God's providence that they're in office anyway. And so the world ruler is really going to come because he's going to be empowered and energized by Satan. And Satan wants nothing more than to destroy what God has. And John said, and the beast which I saw was light. And I told you about these 3 things, that these animals that represented the 3 world empires in the Old Testament that Daniel talks about. He was I saw was like unto a leopard, which represents the Grecian Empire under Alexander the Great. It was swift in its overpowering Medo-Persia and taking over the world so swiftly. Alexander the Great, when he died, when he was 34 years old, and his history says that he sat on the top of a mountain and cried because there were no more worlds to conquer, and he drank himself to death. And then he says, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and that's Medo-Persia, and that means that their big plotting stability that they had in overpowering Babylon. And then they said in his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and that was Babylon. You remember Nebuchadnezzar always spoke loudly, and there was a ruling world power at that time. And notice this, the combination of all those powers will be unified in the Antichrist. And notice this, in the end of verse 2, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Satan will energize him and give him that type of power to carry out his mission on this earth. Now we see this next situation, and we see this in terms of verse 3. And I saw on his head, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. This situation that we see right here, Satan has always wanted to be worshipped. As a matter of fact, if you remember after Jesus had fasted for 40 days, if you remember how Jesus came out from 40 days of fasting, and then he was hungry, and then who pops up? Satan pops up. Satan says, then if you are the Son of God, to turn these stones to bread. It was nothing wrong with Jesus being hungry and eating, but Jesus doesn't take orders from Satan. And there is no thing about if. He is the Son of God. See, he that comes to him must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Jesus then quoted scripture to Satan. He said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth. Then Satan tempted him and said, why don't you just cast yourself down off this cliff? Jesus said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And then Satan took him up into a high mountain and began to show him the kingdoms all over the world, and said, I will give you these if you just bow down and worship me. Like it's yours anyway. Jesus said, you don't own nothing. You don't have anything. That's just like, and I'm making in trouble. So this is like gang members going tagging up neighborhoods. They don't even own a house in the neighborhood. Talking about it's my set. This is my set. You don't even own the house. Because people who own houses wouldn't do that in their neighborhood. And yet Satan is the biggest gang member there is. He's the energy behind the gang members. And when you look at this, Jesus said, look, it is written, thou shalt worship God and him alone. See, Satan wants to be worshipped. That's why he got kicked out of heaven. When he said in Isaiah chapter 14 that he was going to elevate himself higher than God. So that God said, not so, you just get on out of here. So this beast aimed at Satan. He wants nothing more than to be like God. All right? Look at verse 3. Remember when Jesus died? Satan wants to counterfeit that. He said in verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after him. Now there is much debate as to who or what this is. Some theologians believe that it is a world, it is the revived Roman Empire. Some believe that it was Emperor Nero because of his wicked and evil ways. Some have even said that it's going to be Judas Iscariot. But none of those things say, I don't believe it's going to be a world empire based upon the pronouns in the text. It says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded. Now, Satan can't resurrect anybody. Only God can resurrect someone. So this is a counterfeit situation. And what's going to happen during that time? People are going to be so deceived and mesmerized that when this trick is pulled, that when he's mortally wounded, or what appears to be mortally wounded, all of a sudden he's going to be healed and get up from what we call the dead. Well, that's not the case, because the word heals right there, his wound was healed, is the word therapuo. And that doesn't mean anabino, to be resurrected or raised up. That just means that he was healed, but this is a fake healing. And the world is going to be mesmerized, because remember what I told you before? You got MSNBC, you got CNN, you got Fox News, you got all the world channels, right? And all the world's going to see this individual who's dead, and then all of a sudden, what appears to be dead is going to come alive again. It's going to mesmerize the world. And then all the world is going to flock to him because it says right here, and all the world wondered or were amazed and followed after the beast. And notice that Satan finally gets his wish. And they worshiped the dragon in the future, and which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? Oh, those are rhetorical questions that they ask. But again, Satan has always wanted what God has, because the question is asked in the Old Testament, in Exodus chapter 15, which says, who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? So the question that's going to be asked, the rhetorical question that's going to be proclaimed, was asked, says, who is like unto thee, the beast? Who is able to make war? But I can hear the word of God saying in Isaiah 46:9, remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is none else. For I am God, and there is none like me. No matter what of the power and influence that Antichrist will have, the world hungry for a leader will always flock to what they think is going to be their deliverer. I tell you what, we are always looking for a leader, aren't we? After Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, people were saying, who's going to lead us? Who's going to lead us? He did a great work that he did during that time. But God, notice, didn't raise up anybody else. That's right. Because God always tells us to look unto him, so that he can lead us and make us what he wants us to be, and take us where he wants us to go. And then verse 5, and then we're going to go home. And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Notice everything. You notice how much the word gave and given and gave is in this text, which shows that it's only by permission only. Right. You know that God says you can only do so much, right? And I got to ask a question, and many of us, and I asked it in Sunday school a few weeks ago, how many of you set out to do something, to hurt somebody, and didn't get there? Nobody wants to answer that? Let me see if I can rephrase the question. How many have set out to do wrong and didn't get to do the wrong you wanted to? We got a couple honest people in here right now. All right. We've all set out. Let me rephrase it. How many of you have thrown caution to the wind? Do you know what that phrase? Okay, we got some more here. Maybe I wasn't speaking in English. Let me sign next time what I mean, okay? Has God ever blocked you with something? Maybe you can understand that. All right. And I always ask this question. Was there ever that somebody you just had to have? Yeah. You got real quiet on me there? Yeah. The man married to his wife said, yeah. But his wife said next door. There was always that somebody in there. Have you ever been blocked from that person? They didn't give you the time of day? Okay, you guys sleep on me now, right? Okay, come on now. And then I always go like this. And then did God not let you see that individual 10 years, 15 years down the road? And then you had a praise fest, didn't you? Yeah. You had a shout hallelujah for time, didn't you? And all of a sudden, God is by permission only. And so when we see right here in verse 5, we see right here that the Antichrist So it will be given him a mouth speaking great things, pompous words, big, bad, bold talk. And then not only that, he will be blasphemies will pour forth out of his mouth. And that's slanderous speech and disrespectful speech towards God. And power was given to him. That's authority is given to him and unto him to continue for 42 months. In other words, God says, I'm not going to take you out before it's time. I'm going to let it happen. And then he says, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. He lost his mind. Yeah. But at that time, people will be hungry. And they will know their situation. And they will be angry. And they won't want anything to do with anything right or holy. And when he opens his mouth, every time he opens his mouth, he begins to win favor from the people. And every time he begins to blaspheme and speak slanderously against God the Father, and notice this, he blasphemes the name of God. And you know what a name represents? Your character. Yeah. It represents who you are and all that you're about. Yeah. When you do the name game, people think about what the name is. If you know them, you recognize your mind immediately goes to that person's character. Yeah. All right? That person's character, right? So if I mention LeBron James, what comes to your mind? Greatest basketball player of this present era. Yes. All right? Crybaby. Yeah. That's what AT said. Crybaby. I happen to come from the old school. Yes, sir. I'm more into Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and that crew. But you can pick your eras and all that stuff. You can pick your era and I'll pick my era. You guys get it? Bottom line. But when Satan blasphemes the name of God, when the Antichrist blasphemes the name of God, he's saying, he's really not who he says he is. Because look at me now. Where is God right now? What is he doing? How is he carrying things on? Look at the world right now. I'm the one that brought peace to the world. As long as God was in control, there was always wars, chaos, problems, and all that stuff. But then he blasphemes the name of God, right? And then not only does he do that, he blasphemes the tabernacle in heaven. That's the transcendent tabernacle, and that's God's dwelling, where he blasphemes. He says, look at them Christians. Where are those Christians that are not here? Only we are here right now. And look at what's going on in this world. I'm in control of everything. If it had not been for me, things wouldn't be as good as they are. Right now, then he blasphemes those who dwell in heaven. That's believers. Saying, it's better that they're not here. Because they're always messing up our freedom. Always trying to live right and holy. Yeah. Always trying to stop what's going on in the world. I'm not trying to stop anything. I'm just trying to tell people about Jesus Christ. And when people learn who Jesus Christ is, they begin to understand that they are new creatures in Christ. When you become a new creature in Christ, there's one less rebel in the world. And then you make the society a better place because you're in the world and you affect change in the world. And just like Jesus said, he said that upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. When we show up, hell has to back up because God has given us the ability to tell people the simple gospel truth. And when we tell people the simple gospel truth, they come to know who he is, and then lives are transformed. Aren't you glad you're not who you used to be? Aren't you glad that the person sitting next to you is not like they used to be? Oh, nobody clapped on that one. Whoa. We got some haters in the house. There's some work for you yet. Aren't you glad that your their destiny has been changed. From hell down to heaven. There's hope for you beyond the grave. Aren't you glad that there awaits you something that our minds cannot even fathom or think about? That's because those of us, those Christians, those who came to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, recognize that time on earth is passing by. And I'm just like, in Paul's day, and the disciples, the apostles, and all them, I want to take as many people with me. I'm not satisfied seeing people in a state of lost condition. I'm not satisfied seeing people spiritually weak. I'm not satisfied where they are, because until my dying day, I'm going to do what God has called me to do. I'm going to stand and deal with it regardless of whatever comes our way. Oh, I just want to tell you, on the horizon, the state of California Assembly have voted on a bill that makes it illegal if someone comes to me and says, Pastor Moore, my lifestyle that I'm living, I don't like it. I need help spiritually. The Assembly passed a bill this week, sent it to the Senate, that said if I get the biblical counsel, that I can be found guilty and arrested. That's what's happening, everybody. Now, here's what I believe the Lord is doing. I believe the Lord is purging His church. Because invariably there'll be some who will leave. And the Lord's purging His church. That's all right. We're going to still keep going on anyway. We're not going to let people stop because we want to love people the way God says love them, by telling them the truth. California's trying to shut it down. Somebody may be watching me on Facebook Live right now. So I may be a target. So because if any man will come after me, Jesus said, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And in denying yourself, you say, it's not about me, but it's about the cause of Christ. I've seen Him work. I've seen Him deal. I've seen Him keep. I've seen Him open up doors. I've seen Him change lives. Oh, we don't have the same thugs that we used to have here. We don't have the same drug heads in here, do we? We don't have the same alcoholics in here that we used to have, do we? We don't have the same liars that we used to have, do we? We don't have the same pimps that we used to have, do we? We don't have the same loose people that we used to have, do we? We don't have the same angry people with violent anger that we used to have, because God is able to change and make us better. I'm looking at some redeemed folks. People born again by the blood of the crucified Lamb. I'm looking at some people who know who Jesus is. I'm looking at some people who the Lord has brought through when He gave them toils and spirit. I'm looking at some people who are surrendering their life, but says, whatever you want me to do, Lord, I'll do it for you. I'm looking at some people who's going to tell the state of California, you take your bill. And I'm not going to say the rest. I'm looking at some people. We love the homosexual. You guys hear me? We got quiet. We have to love them. I want to love them out. I want to see them come to know who Jesus is. We love the fornicator. See, we put homosexuality as though it's that heinous and mean and so horrible, but yet, you know, fornication outside of marriage is also the same as homosexuality. You guys know that, right? We love the adulterer. Yeah, I mean, quiet on me right now. Somebody said, oh, I don't know. You just don't know what I went through. We love the gang members. Don't. We love the crooked boss. Don't. We love the evil coworker. Don't. We love the nosy neighbor. Don't. You look at I did. It is no secret what God can do. You can change anybody. And I can testify on behalf of a whole lot of you. The Lord has changed you. He's made you new. On the inside out. That's how you change somebody. From the inside out. And what I know about a lot of you from when I first got here, you're no longer like you used to be. Even in that amount of time. I've seen God do some wondrous things. I've seen some young adults come and become leaders in this church. Who a few years ago had major attitudes, major arrogance. But now they're leading out and faithful in this church. I've seen some people, and I'm just testifying, and I know my doctor will tell me, you said you already got it. But I've seen some people that when I first got here, they didn't care much about it. But I know they had Christ in them. Because now they say they love me. You don't know who they are. You ever been on a job and you get a new boss coming in? You don't know what they're going to do. But yet, I've seen some people rise up who would never lead out in anything. And then they would take control of that ministry that God has given them. See, that's evidence of a life that's born again. We've seen some mess ups happen. Have even been messing up sometimes. We've seen the grace and mercy and love of Jesus Christ. Remember that our sins are nailed on the cross. And His blood that was shed for us keeps us clean. He washed me whiter than snow. That's a good thing, everybody. God bless you today.